The stars looked different from this side of the galaxy. Captain Sarah Chun of the Earth Defense Force vessel Retribution stood at the observation deck, her weathered face illuminated by the glow of distant suns. 20 years of military service had prepared her for many things, but nothing could prepare any human for what they had witnessed 3 months ago. The broadcast had been forced onto every screen across Earth and her colonies, a public execution, transmitted with crystal clarity across thousands of light years. "Captain, we're approaching the checkpoint." Lieutenant Rivera's voice broke through her thoughts. "Imperial forces are requesting identification." "Let them wait," Sarah replied, her eyes still fixed on the vastness of space. The memory of that day replayed in her mind. 12-year-old Thomas Hayes, abducted from the Ganymede Research Outpost during what was supposed to be a diplomatic exchange, accused of espionage against the Arcturus Imperium. The Imperium, a coalition of 17 advanced species that had dominated this sector for millennia, had made its intentions clear. Humans were to be taught their place in the cosmic hierarchy. The child had stood with remarkable dignity as the Archon of Justice read the charges. His parents, renowned xenobiologists, were forced to watch from a containment field. The execution was carried out with ceremonial precision, broadcast as a warning to humanity. Step back into your designated development zone. Cease all expansion into disputed territories, or face extinction. They had miscalculated severely. Earth had been watching the stars for centuries before the Imperium revealed itself. Humanity had dreamed, theorized, and prepared for countless scenarios of first contact. But in all those scenarios, even the darkest ones, no one had anticipated an advanced civilization that would execute a child to make a political statement. The response was not what the Imperium had expected. There was no retreat, no diplomatic scrambling, no terrified compliance. Instead, there was silence. For 1 week, Earth and all her colonies went dark. Communication ceased. Trade stopped. The handful of Imperial observers stationed on human worlds reported only that humans were gathering in homes and public spaces, watching the execution footage on repeat. The Imperium interpreted this as shock and awe. The desired effect on the 8th day, when communications resumed, humanity spoke with one voice to the United Earth Government. "You have made your choice. Now we make ours." "Captain, they're scanning our weapon systems," Lieutenant Rivera said, pulling Sarah back to the present. "Should I activate countermeasures?" "No. Let them see exactly what we're carrying." Sarah finally turned from the viewport, her expression coldly determined. "That's the point of this mission. No more secrets between us." The Retribution was just one of 300 warships converging on predetermined coordinates throughout Imperium space. Each carried a full complement of what Earth was now calling Hayes-class deterrents, weapons developed in secret during the decades of apparent human technological stagnation. The Imperium had always seen humans as clever but predictable primates, inherently less evolved than the elder species that formed the Galactic government. They had calculated that humanity would respond to the execution either with cowering submission or foolish, easily crushed aggression. What they hadn't understood was that humans had been preparing for existential threats since they first looked up at the stars. The revelation of the Imperium 70 years ago had only accelerated contingency plans already centuries in development. While openly pursuing diplomatic relations and trading basic technologies, Earth had quietly built something the Imperium believed impossible for such a young species, a capacity for total war that could match even their ancient civilization, the Doctor. Elaine Hayes, Thomas's mother, now served as Earth's special envoy to the Imperium. After burying her son, she had volunteered for the diplomatic mission no one expected to succeed. Currently aboard the Imperium's Central Administrative Station, she was delivering humanity's formal response to her son's execution. "The humans request a full assembly of the 17 councils," announced the Arcturian liaison, voice tinged with disdain as he addressed the gathered representatives. The Grand Archon, a 12-foot-tall Seacian with mottled blue skin, gestured dismissively. "This is highly irregular. The lesser species are permitted one representative before the Trade Council, not a full assembly." Dr. Hayes stepped forward, her simple black uniform a stark contrast to the ornate garments of the Imperium officials. Her gray-streaked hair was pulled back severely, highlighting a face that had aged decades and months. What I have to say concerns all 17 species of your Imperium, she stated, her voice unervingly calm. And I am authorized to speak with the full authority of United Earth. Something in her tone silenced the chamber. Perhaps it was a complete absence of fear or deference that humans had always shown before. Perhaps it was the fact that reports were now streaming in hundreds of unregistered human warships appearing at key Imperium installations throughout the galaxy. 3 months ago, you executed my son to send humanity a message, Dr. Hayes continued, activating a holographic display. Today we respond in kind. The hologram showed real-time footage of human vessels positioning themselves near critical Imperium infrastructure, space stations, warp gates, orbital habitats. Most disturbing to the assembled council was that these ships had somehow bypassed the Imperium's vaunted detection grid. They simply appeared. For every human life the Imperium takes from this day forward, Dr. Hayes said, Earth will eliminate an Imperium world. We begin with a demonstration. The room erupted in outrage and threats, but Dr. Hayes remained unervingly still as she continued. The unmanned research station in the Proxima system has already been neutralized. No lives were taken, but the facility no longer exists. This technology, which we call the Hayes reconfiguration, can be deployed against any target at any distance without warning. The Grand Archon rose to his full height. This is an act of war. The Imperium has stood for 50,000 years. We have crushed civilizations far older than yours for lesser provocations. Yes, Dr. Hayes replied, you have often responded to challenges with overwhelming force. We've studied your history thoroughly. That's why we didn't give you the opportunity to strike first. Check your long-range sensors. The Hayes reconfiguration has already been deployed to specific coordinates throughout your territory. 300 targets, exactly matching the number of human colonies under your influence, are now primed for immediate neutralization. As the council chamber descended into chaos, Dr. Hayes stood impassively. The Imperium representatives were receiving frantic communications from their homeworlds, confirming that human vessels had indeed bypassed their most sophisticated defenses on the Retribution. Captain Chen received the encrypted signal indicating that Dr. Hayes had delivered the message. Phase 1 was complete. Now came the waiting, the moment when the Imperium would decide whether to double down on their aggression or recognize that humanity would not be subjugated. All stations report ready, Captain, Lieutenant Rivera said. We've been scanned by 3 different Imperial vessels, but they're keeping their distance. Sarah nodded grimly. They're realizing that they never really knew us at all. She looked at the display, showing the Imperial checkpoint ahead, the same facility where Thomas Hayes had been publicly executed. Maintain position. Let them consider their options very carefully. The galaxy held its breath, poised at the precipice of either a new understanding or a war of mutual annihilation. And somewhere in the void between stars, the legacy of a brave human child would determine which path the future would take. The Imperium Council chamber remained in disarray for nearly an hour after Dr. Hayes delivered humanity's ultimatum. She stood there motionless as the 17 representatives argued among themselves. Some called for immediate military action, while others, particularly those from species with family structures similar to humans, advocated for caution. The Grand Archon had retreated to a private chamber with his highest military advisors, leaving Dr. Hayes under the watchful eyes of the Imperial Guard. You must understand what you're risking, said a Tellurian representative, the first to approach her directly. The insectoid diplomat's translator rendered her clicks and whistles into human speech. The Imperium has faced rebellions before. Each ended the same way, with extinction. That assumes only one side possesses a capacity for extinction-level attacks, Dr. Hayes replied. She hadn't slept properly since Thomas died. The weight of what she carried now, the potential deaths of billions, should have crushed her. Instead, it had crystallized something inside her, hardening her resolve beyond breaking. We've studied the fate of the Calumni and the Vesperi. We know what happens to species that challenge you openly. Then why pursue this madness? Dr. Hayes finally looked directly at the Tellurian, her eyes revealing nothing. Because you misunderstood us from the beginning. You thought killing a child would break us. Instead, It united us as nothing in our history ever has. Back on the Retribution, Captain Chun was reviewing incoming intelligence reports. The Imperium's fleet movement suggested confusion rather than coordinated response. Exactly as Earth strategists had predicted, the execution had revealed a critical weakness in the Imperium's understanding of human psychology. They had believed humans would calculate value the way the elder species did, weighing one life against millions, choosing self-preservation above all else. Captain, incoming transmission from Admiral Parker. Lieutenant Rivera announced. The Admiral's weathered face appeared on screen. Like most of Earth's current military leadership, Parker had been preparing for this confrontation her entire career. Captain Chun, the Imperium Council is still deliberating. We've detected increased activity at their primary naval yards, but no definitive mobilization yet. How's the situation at your checkpoint? Tense but stable, Admiral. They reinforce the station's defenses, but they're keeping their distance. They don't know what our ships can do, and they're not eager to find out. Admiral Parker nodded. That uncertainty is our advantage. For decades, they monitored our official military development while completely missing our shadow programs. The Haze reconfiguration was just one of dozens of contingencies we developed after first contact. Sarah's thoughts drifted to the true nature of the weapon named after the murdered boy. Few outside the highest levels of Earth Command understood that the Haze reconfiguration wasn't merely destructive. It was transformative. Based on theories of quantum entanglement and dimensional phase shifting developed by Thomas's father before his death alongside his son, the technology didn't simply destroy matter. It reconfigured it at the subatomic level, effectively erasing objects from this reality. The demonstration at Proxima hadn't just destroyed the research station, it had removed it from existence so completely that even the debris field simply wasn't there. No explosion, no scattered remnants. Just emptiness where something had once been. The psychological impact on the Imperium observers had been profound. Admiral, do you think they'll back down? Sarah asked, keeping her voice steady despite the gnawing doubt. Earth was committed now. If the Imperium chose war, billions would die across thousands of worlds. They're logical beings, despite their arrogance, Parker replied. Our intelligence suggests divisions among their leadership. The younger species within the Imperium, particularly the Tellurians and Meridians, have always advocated for greater integration with humans. They recognized our potential from the beginning. And the execution? How could they have permitted that? Admiral Parker's expression darkened. Politics. The elder species, particularly the Cetians and Arcturians, have dominated the Imperium for millennia. They've eliminated emerging threats before. Our rapid expansion was making some of them nervous. So they killed a child to send a message. And now they're receiving ours. In the observation lounge of the Imperial Station, First Commander Taurus of the Meridian Confederation watched the ongoing council deliberations with mounting concern. As the youngest species admitted to the Imperium, the Meridians had always viewed humans as potential allies rather than threats. They had recognized something familiar in humanity's rapid technological development and adaptability, qualities that had allowed their own aquatic species to rise quickly despite evolving later than most spacefaring civilizations. They're going to vote for war, said his aide, Nellen, her gill flaps pulsing with anxiety. The Archon has always wanted to put humans in their place. Perhaps, Taurus replied, his webbed hand gesturing toward the human ships now visible through the viewport. But this time, they miscalculated badly. The humans have been playing a different game entirely. What do you mean? Commander Taurus has spent decades studying human history and culture, fascinated by their resilience and creativity. The Imperium thought humans were showing us their best technology, their full capabilities. It never occurred to them that humans might be deliberately hiding their true potential. But why reveal it now? Why not continue developing in secret? Taurus turned to face his aide, his large eyes reflecting the distant starlight, because a line was crossed. The execution of the Haze child violated something fundamental to human nature. Their protective instinct toward their young exceeds almost any species we've encountered. The Archon thought he was demonstrating Imperium power. Instead, he unified humanity against us in a way nothing else could have. Inside the council chamber, the Grand Archon had returned, his decision apparently made. Dr. Hayes was summoned back to the center of the chamber, where the 17 representatives now sat in uncharacteristic silence. Dr. Hayes. The Grand Archon began, his translator struggling to convey the complex harmonics of his native speech. The Imperium has stood for 50 millennia. In that time, we have encountered and incorporated many species into our civilization. Some joined willingly. Others required persuasion. Dr. Hayes remained silent, waiting. Your demonstration of this Hayes reconfiguration is concerning. Our analysis confirms the Proxima Station is indeed gone. The Archons seem to struggle with the concept. However, the Imperium cannot and will not be threatened. This is not a threat, Dr. Hayes replied, her voice steady. It is a promise, a new reality. The execution of my son changed everything between us. There can be no return to what was before. The Grand Archon's upper limbs flexing what humans had learned was a sign of agitation. Then what do you propose? War would devastate both our civilizations. Not war, Dr. Hayes said. Recognition. Humanity will no longer accept second-class status in this galaxy. We demand full membership in the Imperium Council, with equal voting rights and territorial sovereignty. A ripple of disbelief spread through the assembled representatives. What Dr. Hayes was demanding was unprecedented. No species had ever been elevated to full council status without centuries of probationary membership. The Archon's color shifted to deep indigo, a sign of either rage or astonishment. Humans had never been certain which. And if we refuse? Dr. Hayes' expression never changed as she delivered the words that would determine the fate of trillions of lives across the galaxy. Then we will respond accordingly. Silence filled the Imperium Council chamber. The Grand Archon's chromatic skin had settled into a deep purple hue that even the most experienced human diplomats couldn't interpret. Dr. Hayes stood her ground, knowing that she was now the focal point of the greatest gamble in human history. You demand equality. The Grand Archon finally spoke, his translator barely keeping up with the complex tonal shifts. A species barely 5,000 years into its civilization? We demand recognition of what already exists, Dr. Hayes replied. Whether you acknowledge it or not, humanity is now your equal in capability. The only question is whether that equality will express itself through cooperation or conflict. In the void of space surrounding the station, the Retribution maintained its position. Captain Shin watched as additional Imperium vessels arrived, forming a defensive perimeter that grew more formidable by the minute. Her tactical display showed at least 30 warships now. Far more firepower than her single vessel could hope to match in conventional combat. Captain, we're being hailed by an Imperium dreadnought, Lieutenant Rivera reported. They're requesting direct communication with you. Sarah took a deep breath. This wasn't part of the protocol. Put them through. The screen flickered to life, revealing the distinctly non-Cetian features of Meridian Commander. Captain Shin recognized the species immediately. Aquatic humanoids with iridescent scales and large, expressive eyes. Captain Shin of Earth Vessel Retribution, the Meridian began. I am Commander Taurus of the Imperium Dreadnought Resolute Faith. I wish to speak candidly, if I may. Sarah nodded cautiously. Go ahead, Commander. The Grand Archon is currently deliberating with the Elder Council. I believe you should know that the Imperium is deeply divided on this matter. The execution of the human child was not unanimously supported, particularly among the younger member species. Sarah's expression remained neutral, though her mind raced with implications. Why are you telling me this, Commander? Because war between us would be catastrophic for both sides, Taurus replied, his gill flaps rippling with what Sarah recognized as agitation. Some of us have long advocated for human integration into the Imperium as equals. The Hayes incident has created an opportunity, though at terrible cost. Back on Earth, the United Earth government had entered its third consecutive day in emergency session. President Adeola stood before the assembled representatives of all human colonies, her face grave as she addressed the crisis. We have received word that the Imperium Council remains deadlocked, she announced. Dr. Hayes continues to hold firm on our demands for full council membership and territorial sovereignty. However, our intelligence suggests that the elder species are pushing for military response. Defense Secretary Volkov rose to speak. Madam President, all Hayes reconfiguration platforms are in position. The targeting vectors have been confirmed. If the Imperium chooses war, we are prepared to execute the full defense protocol. The weight of those words hung heavily in the chamber. The full defense protocol was a most extreme contingency plan. Simultaneous activation of all Hayes platforms targeting the homeworlds of the elder species who had ordered the execution. Billions would die in an instant. And what of Dr. Hayes? Asked a representative from the Mars colony. President Adila's expression softened momentarily. She understood the risks when she volunteered. Her instructions were clear. She will not leave the station until an agreement is reached, one way or another. Aboard the Imperium station, alarms suddenly blared through the corridors. Dr. Hayes looked up sharply as Imperial guards moved to surround her. "What's happening?" she demanded. The Tellurian representative approached, mandibles clicking nervously. "The Arcturian faction has ordered your detention. They're moving to seize control of the military response." Dr. Hayes felt her heart race. This was a scenario they'd feared most, a fractured Imperium response with hardliners taking control. And the Grand Archon, overruled by the Military Council. The elder species have invoked ancient emergency protocols. They're preparing to launch attacks on your Hayes platforms. In orbit around the station, Captain Chun received the alert from Earth Command simultaneously with visual confirmation. Dozens of Imperium warships were powering up weapon systems and breaking formation. "Battle stations," she ordered, her voice steady despite the surge of adrenaline. "Activate defense protocols and prepare the Hayes uplink." Lieutenant Rivera worked furiously at his console. "Captain, I'm detecting multiple targeting locks on our position. Imperium vessels are moving to surround us." Sarah opened a secure channel to Admiral Parker. "Admiral, the situation has deteriorated. Imperium forces appear to be moving against both us and their own diplomatic delegation. Request immediate authorization for defensive measures." The Admiral's response was immediate. "Authorization granted, Captain. Protect the Hayes platforms at all costs. Humanity's survival depends on it." As Sarah closed the channel, her tactical display exploded with new alerts. Imperium ships were now on intercept courses with human vessels throughout the galaxy. The precipice had been reached. The next few moments would determine whether two civilizations would find a path to coexistence or mutually assured destruction. Captain Chen's fingers hovered over the activation sequence for the Hayes platform linked to her vessel. One command would trigger a chain reaction that couldn't be stopped. Outside the viewports, the Imperium vessels tightened their formation, weapons hot and targeting systems locked. "Captain," Lieutenant Rivera's voice cut through the tension. "We're receiving an emergency transmission. It's not coming from Earth Command or the Imperium. The signal origin is impossible." "Explain," Sarah demanded, not taking her eyes off the approaching warships. "It's coming from Ganymede Research Outpost. The source ID matches Thomas Hayes." The bridge fell silent. Thomas Hayes had been executed 3 months ago. Everyone had seen the broadcast. "It's a trick," Sarah said finally. "The Imperium is trying to confuse us." "No, Captain. The authentication codes are valid. They're using Dr. Hayes' personal quantum signature. And there's more. The message contains technical data unlike anything I've seen." Before Sarah could respond, her tactical display suddenly changed. The Imperium vessels that had been closing in on the Retribution abruptly altered course, their weapon signatures powering down. Something else was happening down the Imperium station. Dr. Hayes found herself being rushed through corridors not by guards attempting to detain her, but by the Tellurian representative and several Meridian security officers. "What's going on?" she demanded as they pulled her into what appeared to be a secure communication center. "The Arcturians have been deceiving everyone," the Tellurian explained hurriedly. "We've intercepted communications indicating they never intended to honor any agreement with humans. They've been planning something far worse than military action." A holographic display activated, showing a stellar map of Earth's solar system. Red indicators pulsed around multiple points in the outer system. Dimensional anchors, a Meridian officer explained, planted years ago. They're designed to create a localized space-time distortion that would remove your entire solar system from our universe. Dr. Hayes stared in horror. That's genocide on a scale even beyond what we imagined. Yes, the Tellurian agreed grimly, and it explains why they executed your son so publicly. The Arcturians need a humanity united in outrage, focus on visible Imperium targets while they activated their real weapon. My God, Dr. Hayes whispered. Thomas discovered this, didn't he? That's why they took him. The Tellurian's mandibles clicked in what Dr. Hayes had learned was affirmation. Your son accessed restricted files during the diplomatic exchange. He was far more perceptive than the Arcturians anticipated. Back on the Retribution, the message content finally cleared decryption protocols. Lieutenant Rivera's face paled as he read it. Captain, this is, if it's authentic, everything we thought we knew about the execution was wrong. Sarah moved to his station, reading the data for herself. The message contained detailed schematics of devices planted throughout Earth's solar system, dimensional anchors designed to create a catastrophic space-time event that would effectively erase humanity from existence. More shocking was the attached video file. Thomas Hayes, clearly recorded after a supposed execution, speaking directly to the camera. Mom, if you're seeing this, I'm still alive. What everyone witnessed was a synthetic duplicate. The Arcturians have been planning humanity's complete elimination for decades. The execution was just a distraction. You need to find the anchors before. The message cut off abruptly, but its implications were clear. The Hayes execution had been falsified, the boy possibly still alive, and Earth was facing an existential threat far beyond what they had prepared for. Most critically, if they triggered the Hayes reconfiguration platforms now, they would be playing directly into the Arcturians' hands, focusing their defensive capabilities on the wrong targets while the real attack unfolded. Captain Chin made her decision in seconds. Lieutenant Rivera, transmit this data to all Earth vessels in command. Abort the Hayes reconfiguration deployment. We need to redirect all resources to locating these dimensional anchors. Across the galaxy, human ships that have been poised to unleash unprecedented destruction suddenly shifted their priorities. The message from Thomas Hayes, if it was truly him, changed everything down the Imperium station. Dr. Hayes worked frantically with the coalition of Tellurians and Meridians who had chosen to betray their Arcturian leadership. Their combined knowledge gave them a fighting chance to locate the dimensional anchors before activation. The signal from Thomas originated from a mining outpost on Titan. Dr. Hayes said, her hands flying over the alien console. If he's still alive, that's where they're holding him. The Arcturians will be guarding him closely, Commander Taurus warned. And they'll accelerate their plans once they realize we discovered their deception. Then we'll need a diversion, Dr. Hayes replied, her eyes reflecting the holographic displays. Something big enough to draw their attention, while a smaller team extracts Thomas. President Adeola received the transmission from the Retribution with a mix of shock and renewed determination. The cabinet room fell silent as the implications became clear. The execution had been falsified, and the true threat was already embedded throughout their solar system. Redirect all Hayes platforms, she ordered immediately. Target the dimensional anchors. If Thomas's information is correct, we have less than 6 hours before these devices activate. In the darkness of a holding cell deep within the Titan mining facility, Thomas Hayes continued his work. The Arcturians had underestimated him, believing that a 12-year-old human couldn't possibly understand their technology. They hadn't realized that his parents had been preparing him for first contact his entire life, teaching him to think in ways that transcended human limitations. Using components smuggled to him by sympathetic Meridian guards, he constructed a rudimentary transmitter. The message had gotten out, but he knew it wasn't enough. The anchors were designed to be virtually undetectable once armed. Only he had seen the complete schematics. The cell door suddenly hissed open. Thomas braced himself, expecting Arcturian guards. Instead, a human in Earth Defense Force uniform stood there, accompanied by a Meridian officer. "Thomas Hayes?" the human asked, his voice tight with urgency. "I'm Lieutenant Commander Blake, with EDF Special Operations. We're getting you out of here." Thomas grabbed his makeshift device. There's no time. The anchors are already counting down. I need to get to the control hub. Back at the Imperium station, the Grand Archon himself confronted Dr. Hayes as alarms blared throughout the facility. "You've turned my own council against me," he raged, his skin shifting through patterns no human had ever documented. "Do you realize what you've done?" "Stop the genocide," she replied calmly. "The question is whether you knew about it." The Grand Archon's color stabilized to a deep blue. "The Arcturians assured me the execution was necessary to maintain order. I never authorized the anchors." "Then help us stop them," Dr. Hayes challenged. The decisive moment came not in grand space battles or diplomatic chambers, but in the control hub of the Titan facility. Thomas, escorted by the rescue team, faced down the Arcturian scientist who had faked his death and imprisoned him. "It's over," Lieutenant Commander Blake announced. "Weapons trained on the aliens. Shut down the anchors." The lead Arcturian scientist laughed, a chilling sound to the translator. "Impossible. The sequence is locked. In 30 minutes, your entire system will be erased from this dimensional plane." Thomas stepped forward. "That's why you kept me alive. You couldn't solve the final calibration problem." The scientist's expression confirmed Thomas's suspicion. The anchors had a fatal design flaw, one that only Thomas had identified during his initial intrusion into their systems. The Arcturians had kept him alive to solve it, believing they could force his cooperation. "I can stop it," Thomas said quietly, "but not by shutting them down." Instead, Thomas did something no one expected. He recalibrated the anchors to target not Earth's solar system, but the Arcturian homeworld itself. Before anyone could stop him, he executed the command. The galaxy held its breath as justice came full circle. The civilization that had staged a child's execution to hide their genocidal plans now faced the very fate they had designed for humanity. Time seemed to stop as Thomas's fingers completed the recalibration sequence. The control hub's displays shifted, showing the dimensional anchor's targets switching from Earth's solar system to the Arcturian homeworld. The lead scientist lunged toward Thomas, but Lieutenant Commander Blake intercepted him, wrestling the alien to the ground. "Thomas, are you sure about this?" Blake asked, his voice tight with the weight of what they were witnessing. "That's billions of lives." Thomas's eyes never left the screen. "I'm not activating it," he said quietly. "I'm giving them a choice." He opened a communication channel that broadcast across all Imperium frequencies. His young face, thought dead by the galaxy, appeared on screens throughout Imperium space. "This is Thomas Hayes. As you can see, I'm very much alive. The Arcturians faked my execution as a distraction while they positioned dimensional anchors throughout Earth's solar system. I've now redirected those anchors to target the Arcturian homeworld instead." The Arcturian scientist struggled against his restraints. "You'll be no better than us. Is this human justice?" Thomas ignored him. "The anchors will remain armed but dormant. I'm transmitting the deactivation codes to the Imperium Council and Earth Command simultaneously. What happens next is up to all of you." On the Imperium station, Dr. Hayes watched her son's broadcast with tears streaming down her face. The Grand Archon stood beside her, his skin cycling through colors that indicated deep emotional turmoil. "Your son shows remarkable wisdom," the Archon said finally, "far more than those of us who have lived millennia." "He's giving you a path forward," Dr. Hayes replied, "a way to avoid mutual destruction." Across the galaxy, human vessels powered down their weapon systems. Captain Chin of the Retribution received direct orders from Earth Command to stand down. The Hayes reconfiguration platforms, which had been moments away from targeting Imperium worlds, went into passive monitoring mode. The Grand Archon called an emergency session of the full 17 Council. With the Arcturian plot exposed, the balance of power had shifted dramatically. The younger species, led by the Tellurians and Meridians, demanded immediate action. "The Arcturians have violated our most sacred principles," Commander Taurus declared. "And humanity has shown restraint when they had every reason not to. We moved to grant them full council membership, effective immediately." The vote was not unanimous. The elder species remained resistant, But for the first time in 50,000 years, the Imperium Council admitted a new species without centuries of probationary status. S. Thomas was reunited with his mother aboard the Retribution. Captain Chin received an unexpected transmission. It came from the Arcturian homeworld itself, where civil unrest had erupted following the revelation of their leadership's actions. "This is the Arcturian opposition," the translated voice announced. "We overthrew the military council that authorized this atrocity. We accept responsibility for these actions and surrender ourselves to Imperium justice." The galaxy held its breath once more as the dimensional anchors were systematically deactivated and dismantled under joint human-Imperium supervision. But the final twist in this interstellar drama came not from weapons of mass destruction or political maneuvering 3 weeks after the crisis. As the Hayes family prepared to return to Earth, Thomas made a discovery that would change galactic history again. While reviewing the Arcturian scientific database, he found evidence that the dimensional technology had not been developed by the Arcturians at all. "Mom," he said, his voice suddenly small again like the child he still was, "the anchors weren't meant to destroy. The original design was for transportation, instantaneous travel between galaxies." Dr. Hayes studied the specifications. "You're right. They weaponized something meant for exploration." Thomas nodded solemnly. "And I think I can make it work the way it was intended." As Earth took its place on the Imperium Council, humanity brought not just its resilience and determination, but the promise of opening pathways to the stars beyond, turning an instrument of destruction into humanity's greatest gift to galactic civilization.